My name is Ezra, and this is my voice pre-T.
Hello! We're going to talk about something that is really very piano related. Is it? No.
Yeah. In the first year of my undergrad, I came out as a trans male. I think the biggest thing that was the issue was just like microaggressions and also just like internal transphobia, which is something I still deal with.
So, two big words there, right? Microaggression. Care to elaborate for those of us who have no idea what you're talking about?
Microaggressions. They are comments said to or directed at people within a marginalized group. And if you look on Google, the word that comes up is indirect. And this indirectness is usually just due to ignorance of whoever is making the comment, which is probably why it's named micro, but micro is kind of an understatement because microaggressions are definitely more harmful than the term micro suggests.
There's a scale of transphobia. On one end, it's the extreme, which is like killing trans people. On the other end, it's
The pronoun thing?
yeah, pronouns.
Since we're here, I'm as your studio teacher. What would be sort of the top 5 things you would want me to know in our exchanges because you're transgender? So I know we said number 1 is for me to ask you what pronouns would you like to use.
Right. Well,
and to try and make it in the most awkward way possible to really make the conversation difficult and, right?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, you do want difficult conversation.
Difficult conversations can actually be very educational and very useful. It's actually probably where a lot of microaggressions will arise, and given the person that these microaggressions are directed at or who you're having this difficult conversation with, you can actually learn a lot. You may not know that you're being ignorant, and having a difficult conversation gives a platform to someone to be able to speak out and educate the offender.
You're a new person, you walk into the studio and I'm like, hi, are you transgender? I'm not going to do that.
Please don't do that. I know I would probably have a heart attack.
Right? That's awkward, and that's kind of a microaggression in itself, right?
I'd say a little bigger, but yeah.
Yeah, a little bigger. Maybe not micro, maybe.
And here's a very real example of why the term microaggression is very undermining.
Yeah. So, I'm asking you, hi, nice to meet you. I'm Dr. Avni. I use the pronouns he, him.
Mm-hmm. And
Who are you? And you would say,
I'm Ezra, and I use he, him pronouns.
great.
Yeah.
Actually, I think whether or not you're cis or trans, I think it's important to introduce yourself with your pronouns, because on one hand, for people who are trans, it helps to not really isolate us when we have to correct someone's pronouns in fear that they might misgender us on first meeting.
Is there any appropriate time for you to share that information with me as your studio teacher? Is it relevant to your education?
No.
No. Do you want your studio teacher to know that because there might be issues that we deal with, like, I don't know, gestures and motions and...
Maybe, but I think it really depends on the person. Like for instance, I had issues with presentation of gender, so I think that being on stage, not necessarily, I mean this is on like a more macro scale, but being on stage and being perceived as male was really important to me, and I think that actually added to my performance anxiety. So that I would probably bring
Talking about that's profound.
I would probably bring it up then because, yeah, I mean, on top of like worrying about notes and like memory and expression and whatever, like I would also be thinking, like what do my peers think? And I think that's actually why I had such a hard time playing in front of peers, because I was so concerned with how they saw me that I could barely focus on what I was doing.
So the first thing I want to say, I don't think it's only your experience as transgender. I think for me, being gay, I think that's also very intensely in my consciousness. And I think it has to do with the fact that we live in a society that for the most part pretends to accept us but doesn't really accept us. So the fact that we are hyper conscious of that is not, it's not our own phobias or our own imagined perceived, it's actually quite real. Mm-hmm. So when you say, so I shouldn't be thinking about what other people are thinking, no, you should be, because it's important, it's a part of who you are, it's part of your identity. So I think I just want to sort of validate the fact that the hypersensitivity is not misplaced. Right? Two, which is maybe the more difficult subject, is what can you do in your presentation to help yourself deal with that, right? Mm-hmm. So what are some of your thoughts?
I mean, in my own personal experience, it was really, I mean, like, obviously, like, medically transitioning helped me, but not everyone can medically transition.
But when you say, the presentation of yourself as, as a masculine identifying person, do you feel like it was about the way that you were playing the instrument, the way you were dressing? Where do you feel that was actually?
Yeah, I don't even think it was the way I was dressed. Like, I just thought it was just like me. It was like myself. Like, I felt uncomfortable in the way just that I looked. Like, I looked feminine.
I'd like to buy an O for oh, that's what I was talking about. Also, I know I just mixed up two games right now, but honestly, they're all fever dreams from the early 2000s to me, so. The phenomenon that I'm describing is called gender dysphoria, which is basically a disconnect between your mind and your body, where your gender identity is different from your gender assigned at birth, so there's a feeling of discomfort and distress. Not all trans people experience gender dysphoria. On the other end of the spectrum, there is gender euphoria, which is feeling very content and satisfied and validated within the gender that you identify.
I know for myself when I was learning the Talman technique and all of these, you guys like all of these, circular motions that are very sort of feminine in nature, really bugged me. I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm gay, but no, the wrist action is staying solid, and it's a thing, and I think we shouldn't be overlooking it or hesitant to talk about it. I think that for us to be able to go on stage, I'm sure actors deal with it all the time, but as musicians, you just play your instrument. But no, I mean, if you're trying to do this gesture and it strikes you as too feminine, and you're trying to avoid that, then are you going to hurt your playing by eliminating certain motions because they strike you as too feminine? I think that's really profound.
Right.
Do you feel, I know that this is my position, so I'm not trying to project it onto you, but I really feel that you benefit from having experience of both. That I think that the fact that you can sort of pick and choose which colors you want to integrate into a certain interpretation make you a much more interesting and profound interpreter than some of us that only know half of the equation.
Sure.
Do you share that, or do you feel like that's not true?
I mean, for me personally, I do, because I do still agree that I'm a feminine person to begin with, and that took me a while to accept because I didn't really want to be invalidated as a transmasculine person, but it was really freeing to kind of accept my intuitive femininity. Mm-hmm. And once I was over that hump, I was like, okay, yeah, I don't really care, and I'm not really thinking about how my hands look on stage, if they look too feminine or anything.
Right. So I think we're sort of making a full circle by saying it actually does matter in your lessons.
Yeah.
But you really need to feel comfortable to discuss it in such a way that is not, and that for your studio teacher to be sensitive enough to the issue that we are not trying to maneuver you or point you in a certain direction, but we actually just investigate it with you
Right.
what you're comfortable and what you're not comfortable. So maybe the important point is to say, me as your teacher say, I think you should incorporate this motion because of X, Y, and Z. I think it's going to make the passage more fluid. I think it's going to give you more ease, X, blah, blah, blah. And for you to say, okay, no, it doesn't feel comfortable. I'll try it. Or, am I forgetting something?
No. Dealing with studio members.
Ooh.
Yeah. I didn't really deal with too much of that. I mean, so there was like one time where it was like the day I actually came out in studio, and
Wow.
and so I played that day, and I got like notes and stuff, and they're all like, congratulations, and then one of them was like, hey, dead name, or should I say Ezra? And I was like, no, just say Ezra. Don't use my dead name. And I think there's something to be said about, like, I mean, first of all, coming to university, especially like in Western New York, and you're gonna get people who don't really know what's going on, or just people who are straight up transphobic, and they just will keep misgendering you and keep using your dead name.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how upsetting is that to you?
It was really upsetting.
Because I think that's important for the rest of us who don't experience it to understand how hurtful it is. That you're going through this incredible major transformation in your life, and somebody keeps referring to you in something that you're trying to move away from.
Yeah.
So that's something we all need to be more sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that there's action that you need to take to make it clear what the parameters are to people, or is it completely impossible to do because you're in the middle of this excruciating transition?
Well, yeah. I mean, for me, I'm like an introverted person. I don't like conflict, so I'm not going to be just like
In your face
Something
about it.
getting the courage to correct someone. It helps if like other people correct them. So like,
So be a good ally.
yeah, be a good ally. Correct people when they misgender your trans friends.
It doesn't have to be obnoxious either. It could just be, no, Ezra is identifying as a he. So.
Yeah, and if you misgender someone on accident, you don't need to like really apologize. You just correct yourself.
I know that my coming out when I was doing my bachelor's degree was monumental for my entire being. You know, you're always questioning everything. Like the entire persona went through a huge transformation. And it's kind of difficult to go through preparing recitals and going to lessons and practicing when you're going through this really profound experience. So I guess my question is, do you feel that it was difficult for you to balance the two? Do you feel that the two fed off one another? Like, what was that process for you?
Well, I had a really supportive group of friends, like, thankfully. So when it came to when I was like worried about stuff like that, my friends had my back. I mean, the worst thing that has ever happened to me is I thought I was being like chased out of the men's bathroom. And that was before Mason even had a gender-neutral bathroom. And what was really annoying is that actually I had classes back-to-back, so I had 10 minutes, and I would run to the Williams Center, use the gender-neutral bathroom, and then run back here to Foundations. Wow. After that, my friend Mason actually made a petition to put a bathroom in the Mason home. And that actually like saved probably mine and a lot of other trans people's time going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
But
so do you feel that it was like going through the two processes together, like trying to get the degree in piano performance and also coming out as male? Do you feel that was sympathetic? It was antagonistic to it? Like how would you describe the combination of the two?
So I was actually a BA Applied music major, not a performance major. I started off as an education major, but whether you're performing or teaching, you kind of have to be the center of attention. Contrary to the things I did in undergrad, I don't like being the center of attention.
Who's ready for a parent dance party right now?
I think being trans already put a lot of attention on me to begin with that I didn't really ask for, or not necessarily was bad. It was kind of just, it was something you couldn't hide, especially if you're not medically transitioned. You can either hide your gender identity and be misgendered, or you can be out and asked some weird invasive questions. So I was an education major, and I didn't play a string instrument, I didn't play a band instrument, so I was in the choral/general track. My friend was asking me why I wasn't in a choir if I'm going to be on the choral track, and I had a huge issue with being in choir because I was either preteen or just starting testosterone, so my voice, first of all, was all over the place. There is not a range that I could sing comfortably. A big part of my gender dysphoria was that I had a high voice, so having to sing high notes for me was stressful, and I couldn't get around it myself, especially since I'm not a vocalist. I'm like, when do pianists ever have to speak up, right? Sometimes the section would be referred to as the women's section by someone who unknowingly did that, which is another form of microaggression. But I think at the time, because the education track was so stressful, I switched to BA, and that was probably one of the best things I could do for myself at the time, because it was stressful. Like, I know I wouldn't be able to deal with recitals if I was a performance major or practicums, and being an education major, so having just a degree where I could pretty much do what I wanted and deal with my own mental workload was really helpful.
Doctor's visits, and like when I was starting medication, like...
Fun fact, before he was my studio professor, I actually remember the weekend I was going home to start hormones, I saw Eliran on my same flight, and I was like, my entire life's about to change.
From my perspective as sort of the responsible adult in the room that has to make sure that my students are okay,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's huge.
Yeah.
And that maybe it is something that you need to tell your teacher and go like, look, I'm going through hormone therapy, and so my emotions are all over the place because we're trying to figure out all of this stuff. So I might not always be user-friendly in my lessons. I think that's important.
Right.
By sharing how much of the information you want to share, it helps put things in perspective.
Right.
Right? So we're talking about playing masculine music, like we were talking about Bartok, and how does that change the way that you as a transgender person approach the music?
Well, for me, playing things like Bartok and Gershwin, like it just felt really risky, which is honestly, I mean, stereotypically a masculine attribute. So when I was playing Gershwin, I was playing like large jumps and just like really, it just was just out there. It just like felt like a way I could present masculinely, and no one had to know that. Only I had to know that, but it was really affirming for me.
That's wonderful. So do you think that there should be a discussion when you're choosing repertoire with your teacher and say, I really crave this composer or this piece because it helps me with expressing a certain aspect of myself, versus I don't identify with this kind of music, it's harder for me to play? Do you think that's...
Yeah, for sure. Like when I mean, I don't know, because this runs into like technical issues, because I know I needed to play Mozart at some point, but I just could not fucking play Mozart.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
We have a video about that, check that. But why? What about Mozart was the problem?
It was so delicate, and I mean, aside from like technical issues, it was delicate, and to me it was like feminine, and I just didn't want
But
it.
say that, I think that's really important. It was delicate, it was feminine, it was not what she wanted to be expressing on stage, so it was problematic, right?
Yeah.
So what made you come full circle? Me telling you needed to play Mozart. It's interesting that you're approaching it from the perspective of I'm transgender male. I'm approaching it from I'm gay, so, and I'm masculine identifying gay, so I don't want to be identified with the femininity.
Mhm.
And we're sort of screwed up in the way we understand it, because we're both composites of both, right? Masculinity and femininity, and we express certain traits and we choose to not express other traits.
Right.
And through the music that we choose, we get to express different aspects of ourselves.
Mhm.
So maybe point number one is the pieces that you choose to play are really important.
Yeah.
Not only for your development as an artist, but because they are mirroring something that is inside you.
Right.
And if it's a difficult thing for you to mirror, then the performance is going to suffer too. Now, I'm not saying like for us Mozart was a challenge, but we did it and we learned a lot from it, I think. But maybe you're not ready for that. Maybe you want to play more Bartok and more Rachmaninoff and get that,
Thanks.
that energy out there and go like, yeah, that makes me feel good. And then you're ready for something different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say also on the Mozart, just like thinking about the mischievous aspect of it.
So maybe what you're saying is that we have some preconceived notions about what the music is.
Yeah.
So Chopin is always, oh yeah, it's like for the ladies with the white gloves and whatever. But there's some pretty aggressive, pretty intense Chopin to play
Mhm.
that is very masculine, right?
Exactly.
But I think what's really interesting about this discussion is that we tend to remove ourselves from the equation. We tend to think about it as I'm playing this composer. I'm nothing.
Right.
And I will play, I will bring my body, my hands, my brain to the task, but I'm going to keep everything else out of it because it's irrelevant to the execution.
Yeah, and that's such an issue, and that's where there's such a huge disconnect.
Talk about it. Like, how do you feel it?
Well, because then it becomes I'm playing this piece. It's not relatable to me, and now I don't want to learn it. Now it's just work that I have to do, and now I hate the piece.
I know that I've been going through it, playing all the music by women composers, right? Because it's written by a woman, and I'm not a woman. So what do I do with that? And I go like, I understand these ladies very, very well. I really don't have to work hard at that.
Right.
Do I have to use more feminine gestures? I find that there's a lot more elasticity in the music. I think I can say that. I mean, not. I think the people watching know what I mean. But there is, especially in the Clara Schumann, there's sort of highs and lows, and she oscillates between the two very rapidly in a way that I've not experienced before. Her husband is pretty close, interestingly enough, but not to that extent.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it tantalizing and exciting to go into something that is challenging like that for me. But maybe when you're just at the beginning of the process, you want something that is more you, and that you feel more you can identify better with.
Yeah, for sure. I think like exploring your queerness comes more with age, for sure.
Yeah.
Because at first it's just trauma and horrible.
Yes. So something we also talked about, when the music is expressing love between a man or a woman, or a woman and a man, and I think I can't think of any programmatic piece of music that is queer, per se. So we constantly have to go through this, well, how does this apply to me?
Mm-hmm.
Robert Schumann writing to Clara Schumann a love song, okay, that requires that we adjust, right?
Yeah.
What's my point?
Well, it is harder, and I mean, there's always going to be a disconnect when we're playing older music that's programmatic like that. And I guess the only real solution is just to have your own story, and I mean, no one else really has to know that, and you know that, so.
Yeah, I was just telling Ezra that Romeo and Juliet has not been Romeo and Juliet for many years now, so. We make this change in our imagination and in the way we approach the piece, and we make it our own. I think what you said earlier was so important, that if you stop your involvement with the piece because the subject matter is so foreign to you, that's where the danger is, right? That you labeled it as, a cis white man composition, like forget about it, then you're actually doing yourself a disservice. You need to find a way to bridge that gap and to bring that music in. Right? Not that it wouldn't help to have more gay composer music about gay subject matters and gay love or transgender experience. I think that would be really cool, a piece that dealt with masculinity and femininity and the spectrum between the two.
I think so too.
Yeah, we offer that challenge to you, folks listening. Yeah. So what's your message to other transgender folks who are playing music or in this process? Any words of advice?
I guess reach out to your friends. Make sure you have a good community of friends around you that will help you and protect you. Having queer friends really helps you tackle each other's internal homophobia and internal transphobia, and just to be able to vent to them, because they're the ones who are going to understand you.
I think this what I'm getting from this conversation is that we talk so much about communicating the emotions in the music and communicating the intention of the composer and sort of and digging into yourself to find those emotions. I mean, that we spend a lot of time talking about it, but then something so basic as how does my gender influence my understanding of that content, and therefore my execution of it is also huge.
Right.
But it's not something that it's not easy to talk about it because we have different perspectives on it. And then the actual execution would be different from person to person.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It really does vary from person to person.
So maybe the bottom line is just be sensitive to the person you're with and sort of ask them or let them know that you're open to the feedback that they have for you, and just don't be defensive when you get that feedback, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another word of advice that I'd like to add is something that I didn't really think about, but don't compare your transition to other trans people. Everyone who is trans goes through a different journey. I found that when I was first coming out and I was really repressing everything except masculinity and looking masculine and doing everything that a cis man would and just trying to be exactly what a cis man was, that I was a lot more troubled and I had a lot more difficulty just going about life. And once I really just realized who I was at my core and accept that I didn't have to just be masculine all the time to be valid as a man, it really doesn't matter. You define your own masculinity, or you define your own femininity, or you don't even fall on that spectrum and you just say fuck it to the whole thing. So yeah, that's my word of advice. And the last thing for today is, my name is Ezra. Today is February 16th, 2021, and today I am 3 years on T. Thanks for watching. See you next episode.